Welcome to the Brett Davis Podcast.
Well, good afternoon. I am very honored to have a guest today all the way from, is it Chicago?
Yep.
One of the greatest cities for food in the United States. And of course, the subject is going to be very fascinating. It's something that we've never talked about. Scott Phelps, who is the Executive Director of Abstinence and Marriage Education Partnership. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on so much. Really appreciate it. I'm in Chicago now, but I am actually a product of the great city of San Francisco as my home.
Okay, another great city.
Yes.
So let me ask you this: how did you get into abstinence and marriage education? Because it is a very unique subject, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's certainly nothing I studied for in school. I never planned for this. It's one of those things you just sort of fall into, as you go along your life. But I found myself doing a lot of counseling with families and finding that the common thread to so many of the issues that I was dealing with families was sexual activity outside the context of marriage, whether that had to do with abortion or teen pregnancy or family breakdown, whatever the issue was. It seemed like there was always sort of this common theme of sexual activity outside the context of marriage. And that's really what sort of got me into this. More specifically, I'll just tell you the story very quickly. I had a mom bring me her 16-year-old pregnant daughter for counseling. A 16-year-old pregnant daughter was planning to have an abortion. Mom says, "Time out. I want you to go see Mr. Phelps first." There they are in my office, the two of them. And I said to this 16-year-old girl, I said, I know a couple, very sweet couple, friends of mine. They're not able to have children. They've tried and they're not able to do it. So they're trying to adopt, but I don't know if you know, but it's not easy to adopt a baby. They literally had been waiting in line for years. Nothing was happening. They've taken all the tests, done the background checks, paid the fees, everything. I said, would there be any way that you would be willing to work with an adoption agency to do something called an open adoption, where rather than having an abortion, you could work with the adoption agency to meet this couple and decide if you're comfortable with them, and then after the baby's born you could meet the baby, go visit. She agreed to do that. And so it was a beautiful experience where my friends who were not able to have children and couldn't even adopt a child because there's so few children to adopt, even with 2,500 abortions every day.
How many?
2,500 abortions every day in the United States.
Unbelievable.
So they couldn't adopt. And so they got this baby. And so that was a beautiful end of the story. A year later, the same girl, 17 years old, back in my office, pregnant again. And this time off the abortion clinic she went. And I remember that being sort of the catalyst moment where sort of the light bulb went on. Look, I can either sit here behind my desk waiting for people to bring me their problems and try to help them, untangle their life, or wait, time out. Maybe a better idea is I get up out from behind my desk and go out and try to help young people not get their lives in a knot in the first place. So that's my answer to your question, how I got into this.
It almost sounds theological in a way.
In what sense?
Well, because you're counseling, you have a faith and a belief, and not being so disposable. It sounds more about having a relationship with an individual, and probably with God in some way. Because I don't know if you do believe in God, or if we even talked about that. But it seems almost like you would be a great theology would be something you'd be very good at.
Well, yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you.
That's meant as a compliment, by the way.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and it's taken as such. And I do love the Lord, and I am very committed a follower of Jesus Christ. And yet, I sort of hold back on that because I don't want people to assume that this message, as they often do, assume that this message is only for people who are religious. I don't believe that for a moment. I don't believe that the message of the clear and objective benefits of reserving all sexual activity for marriage should be limited only to people who have a religious belief. I believe all people, whether or not they have a religious belief, benefit by reserving all sexual activity for marriage. So that's the only reason I sort of hold back on the religious theme, is I don't want this message to be limited or marginalized in any way. It is a universal message. Even though it is consistent with religious principle, it is nevertheless a universal message which benefits all people of all faiths or of no faith.
Gotcha. What's the biggest challenge that you find going on right now with young adults that seem to be just having a free for all with sexual partners?
I don't have a problem with young adults. I have a problem with older adults. My problem is not with young people. Most of our work, just to put this in context, most of our work was with middle school and high school students. We actually train up educators to teach young people, middle school, high school students in health class, typically in schools across America, how to understand or why to understand the benefits of reserving all sexual activity for marriage. The problem is never the kids. Kids are very thirsty for this message. And when we can get it in front of them, they are eager to listen and to adopt the messaging that we're sharing with them through their teachers and through our materials, workbooks, and so forth. The problem that we face, to answer your question, is all the geniuses, all the smart people, the administrators, the politicians, the health department people, all of the supposedly the lettered folks who are far too sophisticated to believe that young people can in fact exercise self-control and make wise, healthy decisions for themselves. Those people are the problem. The kids are not the problem. When we get our message in front of kids, they are very eager to adopt it, and they respond very well. Listen to this statement that one girl said at a Chicago public school, which we're not able to be in anymore. We were years ago when I started this over 20 years ago. We were in a lot of Chicago public schools. And now, even though many of the schools would be very interested in having us in, it's the administrators, the smart people who say, no, you can't be in here. But years ago, when we were in the CPS, a girl said this, for example, just one example. There's many like this, but this is perhaps the most to the point. She said, I think saving sex for marriage is a great idea. This is after the presentation. I think saving sex for marriage is a great idea. I never thought of that before. That's what I want to do. Ding, 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 ding. This girl represents a generation, not a generation of young people that have rejected the abstinence message, but they've never heard it before. And so there's something about this message that's very powerful that comports with their nature such that when we present it to them, they're like, oh my goodness, where have you been all my life? Like, that makes so much sense. Like, could you say more about this? And so that's really the response that we get. We get very strong and very positive. The comments of that girl, I've got many more where that came from, where I have young people saying, you know, I've never heard this before. I'd like to know more about what it is that you're talking about. Because think about it, where do they hear that? Where do kids today get any encouragement or messaging on the benefits of reserving all sexual activity for the context of marriage? Who's telling them that?
Typically, it's home. Should be home.
Maybe.
Apparently, well, I would think that's where it used to come from.
But of course, you know, the intact married family home is very much on the decline, to the point that 40% of American children are born outside the context of marriage. Many kids don't have a solid family structure in which they're going to hear that message. And even if they are in an intact married family home, a lot of times parents are a little bit unsure about what they should communicate to their young people, because they're listening to the same media mythology that the kids are listening to about everybody's doing it. The best you can do is use contraception, all of that nonsense that's out there. And so a lot of times parents are like, well, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to say. And so what we want to do at A&M is we want to equip parents and educators to teach these programs to our kids well, in a very clearly reasoned, rational manner, so that the kids are like, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. Where do I sign up for that?
Right. So, and you're right. A lot of kids, here's an example what I found out, because my kids teach me everything daily. I learn from them. I know what I know, but I mean, there's things I hear from them that sometimes I'm shocked. One time, maybe a couple years ago, my one younger daughter, who was probably 16 at the time, said that her friends who like to be around us or come to the house, out of all these girls, which was probably, I don't know, 6 to 8 girls maybe would come at a given time, we were the only ones that were married out of all her friends.
This is what I'm talking about. So when you say they're learning the message at home, unfortunately, many are not learning the message at home. And so that's why it's really incumbent upon us as and I'm talking to educators now mostly. See, what we really want to do is flip the script. We want to change what's taught in American schools. The primary message in American schools today is sex education. Our message is not sex education, it's an alternative to sex education. Abstinence education is the opposite of sex education. We think sex education is actually doing great harm to our kids. What is sex education? Sex education today is essentially a codification of the sexual revolution. Sexual revolution was what? You don't need to be married. You can get yourself some contraception and have sex with a whole bunch of people and it'll be great. And that's really what's taught in our schools is there's no mention of marriage. It's all about all the different contraceptive methods you could use and safe sex and protection and the pill and all this stuff. And there's no conversation about preparing for a healthy future marriage and reserving sexual activity for marriage. So we think that the sex education message has been detrimental to our young people and to our culture. And we seek to replace that with a clear message on the benefits of abstinence until marriage.
What do you see as the biggest challenge facing our teens today?
Boy, that's a good question. I think probably a lack of trust and authority. Like there's so much information coming at them now, they don't really know what to grab hold of and what to embrace. So much of what's out there is subjective. One of the things that we do in our seminars is help educators explain the difference between objective data and subjective data. And that what we're all about is providing objective data, which is factual, demonstrable, provably true. And that which is simply people making stuff up. So much of what is out there is just made up stuff. All of the gender confusion, all of that, there's so much out there that's just made up stuff that isn't objectively rooted, sound material. And so, for example, reserving all sexual activity for marriage is factually, objectively, provably the safest, healthiest, best choice you can make. There's no argument to be had there. That's an example of what I'm talking about. It needs to be presented with clarity, not, oh, look, there's lots of different options out there. You can do whatever you want. Yes, they can do whatever they want, but all options are not equal. And they need to be taught the differences between these things clearly. And that's what we really want to do. Provide them the safest, healthiest, best option available, which is to reserve sex for the context of marriage.
Why do you think there's so much confusion with the message that's being taught to the students as far as, and here's the thing, I love everybody. I believe everybody has a right to live their personal life in a certain way that's respectful as long as it's not hurting anybody else. But I also think there's a lot of confusion with kids nowadays. They don't know if they're it, a what, a he, a her. There's all these new definitions. My daughter went to the doctor not too long ago, and there was at least 15 different names on there, and she had to ask my wife, which one do I sign? So my question is, where is all this confusion coming from? Is it because it takes away from problems that we're having and we lose focus on really at hand what we need to really focus on? Or is this something that I don't understand all the terms, all the adjectives?
Well, your illustration, I think, gets to the point that this is really a confusion that is being imposed upon our youth. It's not organic to them. It's synthetic. It's made up. It's being sort of forced upon them. So, for example, you say you're a product of the 80s. I'm a product of the 60s and 70s.
You look great.
Thank you. There have always been youth movements, right, where youth have rebelled against the older generations and older culture. This isn't that. This is the opposite of that. This is the aging culture imposing this on the younger culture. Kids aren't making this stuff up. Kids aren't coming and saying, hey, you old people need to understand there's all these different types of genders. Kids don't know anything about this stuff. It's older people who are telling young people this is the way it is, and they're imposing it on them. And so where is the confusion coming from? it is actually going top down rather than bottom up. Most youth movements throughout history that I'm aware of have been very organic and bottom up. This is the opposite of that. This is top down, clearly. And it is organizations like Planned Parenthood and their ilk that are doing this, and even medical institutions now increasingly. Look, the entire medical, education, governmental, media complex is pushing all this stuff on our kids. And so, you ask why. I don't know. You're going to have to ask them why, but clearly it's happening, right? You can't argue that it is happening. As to their motivation, you're going to have to ask them that question. I can't tell you their motivation. I can't speak to that. I can only observe that it is in fact happening. And someone needs to step in and rescue our kids and help them understand, hey, don't listen to that nonsense. Listen to normal, basic reality and biology, and understand that there are two sexes. Gender is a construct. There are two sexes, male and female. And we need to help them understand why the sexual relationship between male and female is safest, healthiest, best in the context of a marriage relationship where there is a lifelong commitment made to one another. One of the illustrations I like to use with kids is camping. I like to go camping. My wife, my family, we like to go camping. We've been to a lot of the great national parks, Yosemite, Yellowstone, the Grand Tetons. We love to go camping. Whenever we go camping, there's always a sign that says campfires and designated fire pit area only. They're not saying don't have a campfire. It's part of camping. That's why it's called a campfire. So it's part of camping. Nothing wrong with that. Get out your guitar, play Kumbaya, all of that. That's great. But what are they saying? You can't just make a fire anywhere. You'll burn the place down. So if you want to have a fire, do it in this circle of rocks where it's going to be safe and protected, and so that you can have a safe, healthy time. So marriage is the fire pit. And all we're saying is, if you're going to have sex anywhere with anyone at any time, you're going to have a forest fire. You're going to burn the place down. That's where we are today. All of this sexual dysfunction and crazy in our culture, STDs at record highs. It's sex outside of the fireplace, outside of the fire pit. And so what's happening is you've got a forest fire burning. What we're teaching young people is there's a reason why we build the fire within the fire pit, so that it stays safe and healthy and protected. Sex isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing. So protect it in the fireplace called marriage. We've got a couple different videos we can show that give a little bit of an explanation of some of the things that we're talking about. So why don't we go ahead and roll one of those?
Let's do that. You did remember.
I know.
I appreciate that. Go ahead.
Abstinence-only education. What is that? Abstinence-only education refers to teaching young people the safest, healthiest context for sexual activity to occur is in a marriage relationship. See, today's teens are bombarded by sexual messages and sexual imagery, but all without any sense of context. They don't ever really get a sense that sex and marriage belong together. They see virtually every other expression of sexual activity except sex within a marriage relationship. So what is abstinence-only education? Simply that, helping young people understand that sex within marriage is not only a thing, but it's the safest, healthiest context for sexual activity to occur. That's a message that they don't get, they don't hear, they don't know it. They need to know it. And when they hear it, they respond to it very, very well. I had a girl say to me at a Chicago public school after hearing a presentation on abstinence only, here's what she said. I think saving sex for marriage is a great idea. I never thought of that before. That's what I want to do. And you see, this girl represents a generation of young people, not that have rejected the abstinence message, but they've never even heard it. We think it's really important that kids get the opportunity to hear the message of abstinence until marriage as the safest, healthiest context, so that they can make a decision for themselves as to whether or not that's something that they want to do. That's abstinence.
Very good.
Well, I didn't realize that video was going to cover some of the things I just talked about. I guess I'm on message anyway.
There you are, big time.
But that I see that I've repeated that story about that girl because it's so powerful to me. It's such a powerful illustration. I use it quite regularly because here, again, you have this kid growing up in Chicago, third largest public school system in America. And she's like, I've never heard anything like this before. This is incredible. Like, this could be a thing. Like, how did you come up with this? It's like I invented it or something. And it's such a foreign concept to our kids. And this is why I find it really critical to get this message out to young people. Look, we believe that, as you said, look, people can do whatever they want. If you want to have sex with people, knock yourself out. We're not telling you what you can or can't do. We just think you should have the opportunity to learn what is the safest, healthiest choice you can make. We're not saying you have to do it. You don't have to do it, but you should get to learn about it. And then you should get to decide for yourself if you want to do that or not. And that's not the case right now. Most kids never get to hear it. And we think that's wrong. We think that it's really important that kids get a chance to hear this message.
So here's going into a different topic, but it involves teens. There seems to be a lot of kids now that in California, it might be different than Chicago, but in California, we have more kids that are coming out at a very early age in elementary school, thinking they're gay, and they want to have relationships in elementary school already. What do you tell these kids? Because a lot of them are, we have a higher rate of suicide going on right now, as you know.
Okay.
A lot of them have these emotions and feelings, so they think they do. But what do you tell those young kids? I mean, I'm sure you've had that happen, haven't you?
Not so much, actually. I mean, I know this is a situation, but this again comes down to what's being imposed upon them. Like, why is this all of a sudden? Well, why are we all of a sudden having all these kids come out? Latest research is showing, increasing numbers. I won't cite data because I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but certainly more than in the past. Why over these most recent few years have you had this sort of surge in gender confusion, trans, whatever? All this is happening. And I think a lot of it is, again, because it's being imposed upon them. Look, it's never been unusual for young people to have questions about their sexuality. But what's happening now is you have adults sort of forcing kids to lock into that confusion at an early age, rather than letting it sort of play itself out naturally, right? So throughout history, I think people have always sort of wondered about these kinds of things, but then you grow up and you grow out of it. Now, when young people have those questions, it's like, oh, quick, get over here. Let's get you signed up for the LGBTQ plus club. And then, look, there's just so much of this that's being institutionalized that it's really hard for our kids to escape from it. So again, not organic, not natural, synthetic, imposed upon them. I think that's clearly the case.
Have you had kids come to you that were gay that maybe wanted to have relationships with somebody of that?
Sure. So it has come up. It's not nearly as common as you might, as it's presented to be. It does come up from time to time. And all we do is, first of all, we're under no burden to address all things sexual. We're not sexual counselors. Our mission is to clearly communicate to young people the benefits of reserving all sexual activity for the context of marriage. If someone doesn't want to do that or feels like they're going to go in a different direction, they can do that. But it's not our burden is not to counsel young people. Our burden is to communicate to them the clarity and the benefits of abstinence until marriage.
Well, I think that organically is the way it always has been. I have friends that are gay. I don't have friends with all the different names. Now I know kids that are going by all these names and causing more confusion. And I love everybody. Like I said, I think everybody's entitled to live their own life the way they want to.
That's right.
But I'm just very saddened that there's so much depression and there's a lot of confusion. And I think with all these terms and definitions, I think we've opened up a Pandora's box that is also causing a combination of more depression as well. And I think what you're offering is very vital right now. And I think you're on the cutting edge of everything that's happening. Let's show one of the other videos that we saw earlier that maybe the people watching haven't seen yet.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Let's do that.
How do we teach abstinence education effectively? Or put another way, what is a positive approach to abstinence education? I think one of the reasons why people are sometimes a little bit hesitant to teach an abstinence education program is they think it's a negative message. But in reality, abstinence is the safest, healthiest, best message for our teens. And there's a way to teach it well. We don't think the kids need a big, heavy, negative slam down, don't stop, quit, bad. We think they need the encouraging, positive lift up. You can do it. Yes, you can. We think that abstinence education taught well is aspirational. It helps kids think forward about their future, about future career, marriage, family, options. We want to help young people and inspire them toward the good. And so what we want to do is lift up the goal and the hope of future marriage and family. And when we teach kids abstinence, we're actually teaching them the sequence to success. Researchers have identified the success sequence as graduating from high school or college, getting a job, getting married, and then having children. If we can teach kids to put sex in that context, it's going to be very, very good for them. And they respond very well to a clearly reasoned, positive presentation on the benefits of waiting for marriage. And that is the way to teach abstinence effectively and to teach abstinence positively.
Very good. You're a very good speaker as well.
Well, thank you. And, just before the video, you were mentioning about the mental health and depression and suicide and all of that. And I do believe that a lot of this confusion that's being sort of thrust upon our kids is a large part of that. They are living in a gray world where there's a lack of clarity. They are living in a very, it's sort of like they are in very muddy waters and they don't have any vision. They can't see through it very clearly. And that, I think, if doesn't lead to certainly encourages or works toward a sense of confusion, moral confusion, clarity, all of these things. So one of the things, again, our program is about is just clarity. We want to provide to our young people living in a gray world a clear sense of decisions that can be beneficial for them. As I said there, I was quoting from the Success Sequence. Our curriculum for schools is called the Success Sequence Program. It's really not at the end of the day about sex. It's about how do you get from where you are now to where you want to go in life. How do you plan forward? And what we're really helping young people understand is not getting engaged in sexual activity now has significant benefits for you in planning and preparing for your future. That's what we want to help young people understand.
So when a child or a student, teenager comes to you, how long do they usually come to you for?
Oh, they don't come to us. What we do, and that's why, your question about kids asking questions and so forth, we're not in the classroom. What we do is we train and equip teachers to teach our materials in their classroom. Okay. So we believe that the teachers that are in the classroom are the best educators. I do speak to teens from time to time as I'm requested, but our primary methodology is one of multiplication where we're constantly equipping others to do this and to do this well. Our programs have reached over 2 million kids around the country because we're equipping others to do it. So we train and equip the teachers to talk to their kids. And we think that's the best person to do it.
Well, the teachers spend a lot of time in the kids' lives, and parents nowadays are having to work a lot. Have you had any fallback or any challenges of working with teachers?
Rarely. Most of the people who I would say come to our professional development training seminars where we spend a full day training and equipping them are there because they want to be. If they don't want to be there, it's not going to work, obviously. And we'll just tell them that. Like, if you came and you're not into this, no obligation. We'd really rather that you not try to teach this program, because if you're not into it, it's not going to work. So, no, but we get very good responses. I will say that many of the educators that come to our workshops, they're there because they're interested, but they're also sort of skeptical. They've got a lot of questions. They're just not sure, but they're willing at least to check it out. And by the end of the day, typically, it's, oh my goodness, can I start this like tomorrow? I'm ready. Let's do this. They are very much on board once we have an opportunity to kind of work through all of these issues with them. Because I think, too, a lot of teachers, they kind of inherently know that this is good, but they're just not quite sure, how do I do this? And we kind of lay it out for them in a very clear and precise way. And they're like, oh, thank you. This is great. It's not rocket science, but we do
Right.
present it in a
Yeah.
very clear, simple way.
Well, I think it's great what you're doing. And is there any final thing you'd like to share with our audience, whether it's about something that's coming up, like your event? It's coming up November.
Yes, we do have our annual fundraising event here in the Chicago area. If you're in the Chicago area, great. But wherever you are in the country, if you want more information, go to our website, ampartnership.org. We have what's called Hope Partners who fund our work. And what we've tried to help people understand is you can be very worried and concerned about our young people, but what are you doing about it? And by partnering with us financially, it's a way that you are then having a part in reaching a new generation and helping them to have clarity for the future. So we invite people to join us in our efforts to restore the dream for America's youth by providing this message to every teenager in the country.
Well, Scott, I appreciate your time. Very interesting talking with you and being educated about what you do, and a topic that's very well needed, much so right now.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate being on your show, and thanks for the opportunity to share these things. Really appreciate it.
You take care, Scott.
You too. Take care.
And all the sponsors that are out there, thank you for your support. And all that information that Scott just talked about is at the very bottom of the screen. Okay, this is the end of our show. Everybody take care. And if you have any questions, contact Scott, okay? And remember, let's be nice to each other and be respectful.